So, welcome to Lesson 8 of the Organisation Unit of Work from your GCSE, focusing on biology. And the topic of today's lesson is the blood and blood vessels. So, on the page from your booklet you should have in front of you, either online or in a paper copy, and give you some of the specification details about things that we need to be recalling to do with the heart, blood vessels and blood. Specifically, we're going to focus today on blood vessels and bits to do with the blood. So some of that key content is listed here, and what we're going to do is we're going to focus on that. So to start with, turn over onto the next page in your booklet. It's about page 27, I think, and have a look at the knowledge check question for the start of lesson 8. Pause the video, give yourself a few minutes to have a go at these, either from memory or using any revision resources, and we'll go through the answers. Right, you should have unpaused the video. So let's go through the answers nice and quickly together. State the chemical used to test for carbon dioxide. Lime water. What is the positive test for carbon dioxide? Lime water turns cloudy when it has CO2 going through it. State the reactants of respiration. So what are the two things that react together in respiration? They are oxygen and glucose to allow living organisms to generate energy. State the name of the air sacs in the lungs. These are the alveoli. Not ravioli, but alveoli. Chemical formula for glucose. What elements is it made up of? C6H12O6. State where respiration occurs in the cells. What is the site of respiration inside the cells? And that is the mitochondria. It's just what the diaphragm does when we exhale. It's the kind of muscular sheet at the bottom of our chest cavity, and when we exhale, we breathe out. It relaxes to force air out of our lungs. And what's the percentage of nitrogen in exhaled air? It's about 80%. So air that we breathe out. Right. The lesson today is looking at the components of blood. So the parts of blood and their functions. So the jobs of the things that make up blood. Describe the structure and the function of arteries, veins, and capillaries. These are the 3 blood vessels that you need to know about that carry blood. So they carry blood in and around the body. Right, first thing, pause your video. Go find the link on your document or in the comments below and watch this first YouTube clip for me and just make your own notes on its content on the student notes page in your work. Okay, then we're going to go through the text below. So that's the first task. Pause the video, find that link and watch that separate YouTube video for me, then come back to this. Right, you should have done that, so we should have unpaused the video, and now we're going to break down some of the information that's been presented to you in that clip there. So, blood comprises 4 main parts: plasma, red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. So let's break this down a little bit. The blood comprises of a yellow liquid, of a yellow liquid called plasma. So comprises is just another word for it's made up of, with billions of cells suspended in it and dissolved substances too. Red blood cells are so numerous that they give the blood its red colour. In the lungs, oxygen bonds to a red pigment in the red blood cells called hemoglobin. It's important that we have enough iron in our diet because it is needed to make hemoglobin. People that don't have enough iron in their diet are said to be anemic. So this idea, in red blood cells, oxygen is carried by an additional substance within the red blood cells called hemoglobin. And if you don't have it, you can't carry enough oxygen. You can't carry oxygen without it. Now, red blood cells, their main function is to carry oxygen. Having hemoglobin is one adaptation of a red blood cell that allows it to carry oxygen effectively. It has a couple of other adaptations as well. Now, if you were to look at a red blood cell side on, it might have a bit of a strange shape like that. Now, the reason why it has this strange shape, it's called a biconcave disc. And this shape increases the surface area. So it increases the surface area of the red blood cell so that more oxygen can get in and out of it, so it can carry even more oxygen, be more efficient. The second thing about a red blood cell is it has no nucleus. And again, that is simply to make more space for oxygen. Now, people that don't have enough iron in their diet are said to be anemic. If they don't have enough iron in their diet, they have not enough hemoglobin. Now, if they haven't got enough hemoglobin, their red blood cells carry less oxygen. And if they've got less oxygen, what process are they going to be carrying out less of? They've got less respiration occurring. And if they've got less respiration occurring, what are they going to end up with less of? Less energy. It can make people tired and weak and ill when someone is anemic. Right. Blood also contains white blood cells, which form part of our immune system. This defends our bodies against invading microorganisms such as bacteria, fungi, protists, and viruses. So white blood cells' main job is to fight off pathogens. Now, there are two types. Lymphocytes, which fight off pathogens by producing something called antibodies, which we will look at in a later unit on infection and response. And the second type is called phagocytes. Now, what they do is, if you imagine you've got this is your pathogen. Your phagocyte, think of it a little bit like Pac-Man, and they engulf pathogens and eat them and consume them and digest them and kill them off. So these you'll come across more, but lymphocytes and phagocytes are some important extra terms to be thinking about. Now, platelets are fragments that cause our blood to clot, which forms a scab when we cut ourselves and prevents further blood loss and infection. So, platelets are fragments, and they are specifically fragments of cells or dead cells. And they cause our blood to clot. Now, when you have a blood clot, blood is stopping flowing at that specific point. Blood clots that are formed inside blood vessels, and that process is called thrombosis, are dangerous and normally do not occur in healthy people. Lifestyle choices such as smoking and poor diet increase the chances of blood clots forming. These can be fatal as they restrict the smooth blood flow to vital organs. And if you haven't got enough blood flow, what else are you restricting? you're restricting oxygen to cells, which is needed for respiration and energy. Now, smoking and poor diet. The reason why these become such an issue is they can produce things like plaque and cholesterol that block up arteries. And stop blood flow. The final part of the blood to be thinking about is plasma. Plasma is simply the liquid that carries everything. So the liquid that carries everything carries these other components: platelets, white blood cells, red blood cells, but it also carries extra things like carbon dioxide, products of digestion. So we're talking about things like glucose and amino acids. Chemical messengers called hormones, from where they're made, which is in the glands and where they are needed. Target cells, antibodies that destroy bacteria and viruses, waste substances called urea from the liver to the kidneys, where it's diluted to make urine, which is obviously then excreted from the body. So, they're all made in the soft sponge-like tissue in the centre of most bones. This part of the bone is known as bone marrow and is a source of stem cells or adult stem cells. Now, if you remember, stem cells are undifferentiated, unspecialized cells that can grow into new cells. So they can be used to replace tissue, replace organs, used in things like gene therapy. So they're produced inside your bones in bone marrow, along with blood cells, red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets. Right, two things I'd like you to do now. Pause this video and go and find this link in the comments below or in your resources you've got. Watch it, then have a skim read through of the questions below. And just in the box at the bottom of this page, see if you can answer these questions yourselves based on what we've talked about. How do red blood cells carry oxygen? What's the job of white blood cells? What is a platelet? What is a platelet? What are platelets for? What is thrombosis? And what is the job of plasma? So pause the video, find the link for that, watch that one, and then answer these questions at the bottom of your page. Right, you should have done that. Watch the clip, read through your text, had a look at these questions and come up with some answers. So let's see if we can answer them ourselves. So, how do red blood cells carry oxygen? They do it by binding to hemoglobin. What's the job of a white blood cell? To fight off pathogens. What is a platelet? It's a cell fragment, a broken up part of a dead cell. What are they for? To form clots to prevent blood loss. What is thrombosis? It is a clot inside a blood vessel, which is very dangerous. And finally, what is the job of plasma? Its job is transport. It's a transportation liquid to carry everything that is in the blood and all those additional substances we've mentioned earlier around the body to where they're needed. Okay. Now, have a look at the top of the next page. And there are two more questions I'd like to pause your video and have a go at yourself based on what we've talked about. Right, if you want to pause the video, and go through the answers nice and quickly. Some of the structures of the blood and their functions. So plasma, yellow liquid for transportation. Red blood cells transports oxygen. White blood cells, defense against disease. And plasma, blood clots and forming scabs. Anemia. Explain why someone who has anemia looks pale, feels cold, and finds physical activity difficult and tiring. They're anemic. They have less iron, which means they have less red. Remember, it's a pigment, hemoglobin, in their red blood cells, which means they look pale. And also, if there is less hemoglobin, there's less oxygen carried by the red blood cells, which means they are tired and weak due to a lack of energy. Now, reviewed briefly the cells within the blood. Now, there are three types of blood vessels: arteries, veins, and capillaries. And blood vessels' job are to transport blood around the different parts of the body. So, again, pause your video, draw out a table below, and having watched the video, see if you can fill out a table that details the structure and the function of each of the types of blood vessel. And also, if you can, draw out a labelled diagram. So pause the video, have a look at this YouTube link for me, and see if you can do that now. Right, should have unpaused the video, and hopefully you've come up with a table a little bit like this that contains a variety of bits of information. So arteries, veins, and capillaries are your main types. Your function of your artery is to carry blood away from the heart, and it's to do it at high pressure. The only one where this, it's carry blood away from the heart, and it does it at high pressure. Predominantly, they carry oxygenated blood, except for the pulmonary artery, which only takes deoxygenated blood to the lungs. Now, to do this, they need a thick muscular wall, which means they're really elastic and they're stretchy, so that they can pump the blood around the body long distances at high pressure. And a small lumen is just the space in which blood flows. It's a tube. So it's quite a small space. So a small amount of blood flows through really quickly at high pressure. A vein is the opposite. It carries blood to the heart and carries it at low pressure. Veins have valves to stop the backflow of blood going the wrong way. They have thin walls and large lumens, so lots of blood can get down a vein really quickly. So as much of it can get back to the heart and lungs and being re-oxygenated as quickly as it possibly can. And then you're left with capillaries. Capillaries carry blood to cells and tissues. They're the point where blood reaches a cell, and then from the blood, things like oxygen and glucose can move directly into the cell, and carbon dioxide and water can move directly out of the cell into the blood. So they connect arteries and veins as well. So they're one cell thick, which gives them a really short diffusion distance, which is what's needed for exchange between blood and cells. So hopefully you've got that information down. Pause the clip if you need to, just to finish getting it down and confirm what you've done. You've probably done a diagram as well. And if you want to, you can also go and find this clip and just watch it as a final little summary. Right, once you've done that, if you want to finish off with having a look at these knowledge check questions for me to finish. Pause the video, have a look at it, and then we'll go through them to finish. So what's the function of a white blood cell? It's to fight off pathogens. What is needed in our diet to make hemoglobin? Iron. You get lots of it in chocolate and broccoli. What do we call blood containing oxygen. We call it oxygenated. State which blood vessels mainly carry deoxygenated blood. Those are the veins, except for the pulmonary vein, which takes oxygenated blood from the lungs back to the heart. Name the liquid part of the blood. Plasma. State the name of the part of the blood that destroys microbes. These are the white blood cells. Give the name of the smallest blood vessel. So these are the platelets because they're fragments of cells. And suggest an adaptation of these. Oh, no, I've got that wrong. Sorry, blood vessels. Capillaries are the smallest of our blood vessels. Arteries, veins, and capillaries. And their adaptation is they are one cell thick, which makes them good for substance exchange between the blood and cells and tissues. Well done, folks. So that is your lesson on blood vessels and content of blood.